I just read about Black History Month, which is going to be in February.
Oh, that sounds interesting. What is it about?
It's about recognizing and appreciating African Americans' role in US history.
That appreciation is truly important. Since when does this month exist?
Here it says that it was established in 1976 and kind of followed and was based on the Negro History Week from 1926.
Alright, but looking at the events from last year, this appreciation doesn't erase racism from America.
Yeah, that's true. I remember how shocked I was when I heard about George Floyd being murdered from a police officer last year.
Yeah, and for me I really consider Black Lives Matter becoming big as something truly important and necessary.
Black Lives Matter is a movement having its roots in 2013. Founded after the case of Trayvon Martin, an Afro-American schoolboy who was shot by a security guard that has been acquitted afterwards. The movement is all about gaining equality for people of color and ending systematic racism against them. Black Lives Matter gained worldwide attention after the murdering of George Floyd in 2020. Yes, I remember how it raised my awareness on how bad the situation for African Americans still is in the US.
I wonder how it came this far.
It all started in the 17th century. More precisely in 1619, when the British in America bought the first African slaves from a Dutch ship. Afterwards, the Atlantic trade began. The core of the trade was goods for slaves. Without African elites, who profited economically from the trade, no major power in Europe would have been able to contact slaves from Africa and successfully develop a slave trade. The slaves had to face an animal-like life in America. But slavery was tolerated because the Americans legitimized their behavior by thinking of them as something better and thereby segregating the races. The work from the French doctor François Bernier, who defined the term race by a human's appearance, was fundamental for the development of racism because people could base their racist behavior on science, so it was right.
A long time nothing changed for the Africans in America. Till they started to rebel, for example in 1739, when slaves in the South initiated the so-called Stoner Rebellion, so a demonstration which was not successful and was dejected. While a difference of opinion developed with regard to slavery between the northern and southern states, through the spread of evangelicalism in the north, racism was considered as a sin. There was more agriculture in the south, therefore the southern population was more interested and pro-slavery and didn't share the same opinion as the northern people. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln, who was not a proponent of slavery, was elected president and declared all slaves free. The South did not like this, which led to civil war between North and South breaking out in 1861. But this declaration did not mean equal rights for the African Americans, because black codes became a thing, segregating the black population further.
In the South, the Ku Klux Klan formed, who is known for slavery and segregation. They were against African Americans being free people and having rights. Thereupon they killed many, in 1868 for example over 1,000. Coming back to no equal rights for the African Americans, the South passed so-called Jim Crow laws in 1877. Jim Crow was a stereotype for a criminal, dancing and singing black person. These were segregation laws, distinguishing the black from the white in almost every situation and location. Separated bathrooms, churches and a lot more. This race segregation was considered legal by the Supreme Court in 1896. But it was not only segregation and exclusion. In addition, between 1890 and 1945, people of black color have been lynched. tortured.
Around the time of World War I, many black people settled to the north, dreaming of a better life. At this time, first civil rights organizations formed by people of color and white activists. After the end of the war, these organizations became more and more popular. Especially World War II led to an upcoming feeling of incomprehensibility and activism, because the Americans fought against German segregation. This setting led to the Civil Rights Movement, a movement of people protesting for equal rights. An act of this movement was, for example, when the black woman Rosa Parks did not clear her seat in a bus for a white person in 1955. An illegal behavior. The most known person of this movement is Martin Luther King, who held his popular speech, "I Have a Dream," desiring equal rights in 1963 at the March of Washington.
The Civil Rights Movement led to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, where segregation laws were repealed. After this, more offices, for example in politics, were represented by black people. But although racism and segregation was no longer legal, it still existed. An example, therefore, is the case of the African-American Rodney King, who was a victim of police violence in 1991. The policeman was acquitted at his first trial in 1992, which caused enormous unrest. When Obama was elected president in 2008, everyone had hoped for an America without racism, but this was not the case.
Oscar Grant 2009, Trayvon Martin 2012, Michael Brown 2014, Eric Garner 2014, all victims of white violence. Systematic racism against people of black color since the slavery.
Okay, wow. That was a lot of history in such a short time.
I did not know all of this. I knew that there were slaves from Africa and America, and I knew that they have been treated very different and worse in comparison to white citizens. But it shocked me that the civil rights movement and act have been in the 20th century.
I imagined it being earlier, like really in the past, and not this present. I mean, my dad was born in the same year as the segregation laws in America were repealed. That's crazy, shocking, and also really sad.
And that racism is still this current is really something we should be ashamed of. And we have to realize that this is not a US problem. Racism against people of color is also part of Germany.
That's true. You know, just last week the talk show with Thomas Gottschalk in it?
Yeah, 5 white people talking about racism. That's not right. For example, when Gottschalk talked about how he understood how it is to be black when he wore a Jimi Hendrix costume. Unbelievable.
Or when Janine Kunze compared what she had to go through due to being blonde with big boobs to having to deal with racism due to the color of your skin.
It really is embarrassing that this show has been shown in German television. I think it is extremely sad that our world is so innovative and modern, but still shaped by inequality and racism.
Race disparity in the US started with the slave trade in the 1620s. I cannot comprehend that nowadays, over 400 years later, people of color have to deal with worse treatment than white people do. That they have to face racism every day.
It is impressive, in a very awful way, how white supremacy really is a thing.
We're wondering how we can overcome it. How can we achieve a world where everyone is treated equal? I do think movements like Black Lives Matter do something. But in the end, it is something in people's mind. There are tons of people who just think that they are better due to the color of their skin.
This is not only how African Americans are treated in America. All over the world, minorities are segregated and treated badly. That is something honestly hideous.
What we can do is to spread awareness, educate about the history, and particularly stand up for people if you notice racism.
That's true. I do not know if there is much we can do as children for racism to end. But what we can do is to stand up for people and fight for equality.
Racial disparity in the US, 1619 till today, systematic racism with no end in sight.